Thank you for purchasing a stack-loaded lat attachment by Deltech Fitness. Your DF838 will come in 5 boxes, with 4 small weight stack boxes and 1 large box including a hardware pack full of nuts, bolts, washers, rubber donuts, chains, and snap hooks. Then you'll have A. Top frame, B. Bottom support, C. Lat bar, D. Low bar, E. Cable set, F. Rear support, G. Front support, H. Floating pulley assembly flange, I. 4-inch flanges, J. 4.5-inch pulleys, L. 3.5-inch pulleys, AA. Bottom frame, BB. Upper pulley frame, EE. Selector rod, GG. Weight stack rods, LL. Rubber shoes, FF. Weight stack pin, JJ. Spring pin. So we're going to start by bolting the bottom support to the bottom frame of the Smith machine or power rack you're installing it to. Both the Smith machine and the power rack will use the M12 by 79mm bolts and a 4-inch flange. Thread the bolts through some washers, through the flange, through the holes of the cross member, into the base support, then cap them off with a washer and nut. Once both bolts have been installed, go ahead and tighten them down with a pair of 19mm wrenches. Next, we're going to install the front support. The front support will have a pulley bracket, and that will go toward the inside of the Smith machine or power rack. Slip the front support over the locating dowel and M12 stud. Then cap it off with a washer and lock nut. Don't tighten it with a wrench just yet. Next, we're going to grab the rear support and slide it onto the back dowel and stud and cap it off with an M12 washer and nut hand tight. Next, we're going to install the top frame assembly. We kept the nuts and bolts loose on the bottom to make this step easier. Slide the tubes on the bottom of the top frame assembly into the tops of the front and rear supports. Next, we're going to hold it in place with the M12 bolts and washers. If you're facing the machine, make sure that the bolts go in from left to right. Slide the upper pulley frame onto the bolts, then hold it in place with some M12 washers and lock nuts. The Smith machine has a 3-inch wide upper cross member, while our power rack only has a 2-inch wide upper cross member. So for the Smith machine, grab the longer M12 bolts, and for the power rack, grab the smaller, thinner M10 bolts. Now that you've located the correct bolts, go ahead and slide them through the 4-inch flange into the cross member, then bolt the top pulley frame assembly to the cross member. Next, we're going to install the bottom frame. Grab the bottom frame and the 3 rubber shoes. The rubber shoes have a flat bottom that will face toward the floor opposite the big holes on the top. Slide the rubber boots onto the bottom frame, then line up the flange with the holes on the bottom support. Use the long M10 bolts, washers, and nuts to bolt the bottom frame to the bottom support. Finally, tighten them down with some 17mm wrenches, then tighten down the front and rear supports with some 19mm wrenches. Next, we're going to install the selector rod into the top plate. Grab the selector rod, top plate, and roll pin. The roll pin will go through the top plate into the top hole of the selector rod. Line up the top hole of the selector rod with the hole in the top plate, then gently tap the non-beveled side of the roll pin into the top plate. Make sure to go in easy as you feel for the hole in the selector pin. Rotate the selector pin with one hand and hold it straight as you tap the roll pin through the selector pin into the back of the top plate. Next, we're going to install the weight rods. The weight stack rods have a threaded insert in the top of the rod. Install the weight stack rods into the holes of the weight support at the bottom, then slip the rubber donuts over top. Our weight plates have plastic spacers between them, so make sure that the plastic spacers face down. Slide the weight plate on the weight rods all the way down to the bottom and gently set them down at the bottom one by one until all 19 of the regular weight stack plates have been installed. Finish it off with the top plate, then bolt the weight stack rods to the upper pulley frame with the small M10 by 25 bolts and washers. Now that everything on the frame has been bolted together, it's time to tighten all the nuts and bolts on the frame. With everything tight, it's time to run the cables. Grab the top cable, which has a bolt on one end of it. Feed the bolt through the front slot on the bottom of the top support, then out the back slot. With the cable pulled through, it's time to install the front pulley. Grab a small 3.5-inch pulley and place the groove of the pulley on the cable and push it up into position. Thread the long M10 bolt through a washer, through the pulley bushing, then through the pulley and out the other side. Finish it off with a pulley bushing on the other side to keep the pulley centering the tube, then add a washer and a lock nut hand tight. Now we're going to install the rear pulley the exact same way. Place the pulley under the cable, then feed it with the pulley groove up into the back pulley slot and bolt it into place with the bushings, washers, and lock nut. Go ahead and make sure that the pulleys rotate freely and the cable feels smooth. Next, we're going to install the pulley in the upper pulley frame. Grab the cable, add some slack to the cable, then loop the cable up and over the pulley and place the groove of the pulley in the cable. Put the pulley in position, then use the same bushings, washers, and lock nut to fasten it into position. Next, take the end of the cable and screw it into the top of the weight stack. Now that the top cable's been installed, it's time to grab the bottom cable and bottom pulleys. Grab two small 3.5-inch pulleys, feed the cable up over the bar in the pulley flange, then out the back of the front support tube. Once the cable is in position, place the pulley onto the cable, then use the small M10 bolt, washers, and nut to bolt it into place. After the front pulley has been bolted into place, put the cable between the two flanges on the bottom support tube, then bolt that pulley into place. Once both pulleys have been installed, grab the snap hook and install it onto the end of the cable. Then install the snap hook onto the tab of the front support tube. Once the cable has been installed, make sure to work out any kinks with the snap hook and pull the cable up into position. With the cables in place, it's time to build the floating pulley assembly. Grab the floating pulley brackets and run the small M10 bolt through a washer through the top single hole of the flange, through the pulley, then out the other side of the flange. Cap it off with a washer and nut. Next, straddle the top cable with the pulley bracket and place the cable in the groove of the pulley. Next, we're going to grab the bottom cable, making sure that the cable is in the grooves of the bottom pulleys. Next, we're going to lift the stack up just a little bit to bring the floating pulley bracket down, so we can bolt the bottom pulley in the bottom hole of the bracket. Once the bottom pulley is bolted on, let the stack down, make sure that the cable is correct at the bottom, then cap it off with a washer and nut. Once we've got both of the floating pulleys installed, go ahead and set the tension of the cable by tightening the stack bolt until the top plate is just barely hanging. Then tighten the jam nut. Finally, it's time to tighten all of the pulley bolts. These bolts don't need to be super tight, they just need to be through the nylon lock of the lock nut. Make sure not to over tighten the bolts that have plastic bushings, as you can crack them if you make them too tight. Next, we're going to install the weight selector pin. Grab the weight selector pin, then using your fingernail, get the ring started around the cable, feed it all the way through the cable, then down onto the top of the stack selector pin. Next, we're going to install the stack stickers. I like to clean the weight stack with some acetone or another degreaser that doesn't have a detergent. This will ensure that the stack stickers stick really well to the weight stack and last over time. Next, I like to take a piece of masking tape and use it as a straight edge to line up all of the stickers with. This will ensure that the stickers don't drift one way or the other while I'm trying to keep them straight by eye. Carefully install all of the stack stickers one by one, making sure to keep them straight, then take off the piece of tape. Finally, using your snap hooks and chains, you can attach the row bar or the lat bar and start your workout. Thank you for choosing Deltech Fitness.